Today's topic is going to be a Microsoft Priva, which is a relatively new family of products focused on streamlining your privacy management. In today's session, we'll start with an overview of Priva, followed by a demonstration. Richard Beserra will start with the overview, and Steve Thomas will commence and follow with the demonstration. All attendees will be muted until the Q&A section at the end of the session, but we'll be monitoring chat throughout, so please feel free to put any sort of questions or comments in the chat. The recording will start momentarily, but first we'd like to start with a joke of the day. Let's see here. So Richard.
Yes.
Why did the astronomer cross the road?
Ooh, it's a good one. I have no idea. Why?
To get to the other side.
I like that.
So without further ado, everybody, thank you so much. I'll be coming back shortly after this, at the end of this presentation. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to Richard. And just a quick note, you'll see here Steve put some poll questions in there. So thanks again for joining. Richard, all yours.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everybody, for attending our webinar on privacy risk management and subject rights requests. Let's get right into it. So what we at Microsoft have been seeing over the last couple of years is an increase in privacy regulations all across the US, and especially at state government level. California was actually the first one to pass their own data privacy law, the CCPA, and I'd imagine a couple of people on the call here have run into it. It's modeled after the European GDPR. And as you can see here in these two charts, the one on the left is from 2020 and the one on the right is from this year. Those states have either passed legislation that regulate privacy, or they've turned it over to task forces, which can move a lot faster while legislation is kind of stuck in limbo. Or they've got their laws in limbo, they're sitting inactive, and legislators could come back and turn those into laws almost without warning, with very little heads up. So the requirements vary. They're popping up almost overnight, and trying to meet them is typically expensive and time consuming, especially because every state is setting their own different requirements. So there's no one standard anybody is following. So most organizations are meeting these requests by hand. And these are requests for things like the right to be forgotten. Find my data, please delete it. Or they're requests for, hey, what do you have on me? I'd like to know. And IT departments doing this by hand, they don't want to. They're already squeezing 12 hours of work into an 8-hour day, and they don't have time to build the privacy training from scratch or to develop their own schedules for clearing out stale private data. So this leads to agencies and organizations turning to whatever happens to be quick and easiest. That usually means keeping info in things like email and spreadsheets, because everyone knows how to use Excel. Everyone knows how to double-click an email message. It's easy, but it's also an inefficient and expensive use of an admin's time, and it's unsafe. Because by doing that, now they're creating copies, they're journaling that data, and it's in other locations where it could potentially be leaked or misplaced. So, Priva, the privacy risk management solution, helps you approach that problem from a centralized location, and it helps you incorporate automation. Look at her, she looks so happy to be in the middle of that circle. This is where you can start doing things like identifying what private information somebody has in their OneDrive or in their email or in some other repository. This is where you can also automate deleting that data if it's a year old and it contains somebody's address and nobody's worked on it in that year. This is how you can make sure you minimize the data that you're holding on to. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, did I hear somebody have a question?
I think somebody accidentally came off mute, but you're good.
No worries then. So yeah, this is how you can go through and you can find that data that accumulates over years of business and correspondence, people's names, people's related info. and you can minimize what you have. You don't need to hoard that data in archives and have somebody's private info from 10 years ago. You can automate getting rid of it now. Now, we do incorporate privacy when we're building this data because there is a concern if you're going to have somebody in your organization go through and start looking up the content that belongs to somebody's private information. Who gets to do that? How are we going to aggregate that info? You're looking people's phone numbers and addresses and work histories and medical histories up. How do you protect that information? Well, one way is that Priva doesn't go through and dig this all out automatically. Once you sign up for it, it doesn't start trawling your environment and collecting data on everybody. It waits until an admin or until somebody you designate as approved goes in and says, here is the person who requested their information. Let's do a search on them and let's take a hands-off approach to everybody else. So by default, it only applies to the people you tell it to apply to. And otherwise, we keep our nose out of it. And this is how you can keep your organization's nose out of it. You can say, hey, we're not digging up everyone's data. We're only doing it when they ask for what they ask for. And when you are looking up their info, you have this feature called pseudonymization. This is where we take somebody's information, their unique identifiers, such as their username, and we replace it with a string of unique letters and numbers. So we can still tell one account from another, this content belongs to this account, but your admins can't see that it's Grace Berry or that it belongs to, Nathan Jones. All they see is a string of numbers and letters associated with it. That way they can't tell if they're looking up data on a public persona or on maybe their friend or on their boss. They can't tell they're looking up a celebrity's information from some random consumer that asked for their data to be deleted. And then how do you control who gets to actually use this stuff? That's what we use our RBAC or role-based access controls for. So now you can have admins in your organization that are specifically designated for this role. They can go through specific training, be certified and authorized to only do this, and you can make sure they can't access any other part of your organization's admin controls. So they can come in and run these privacy request searches, and they can't go perform something like an e-discovery search. They can't change settings for their accounts or somebody else, and vice versa. If you have an IT support team, if you have a team that handles logging and other requests, you can make sure they cannot go into this portal and perform searches on private information. We make this very easy to do. It is very straightforward. There is a user interface for it. It is something that you can set up and train your IT teams to configure and follow with a single day of training. And this is what pseudonymization will look like in practice. And this is something that we'll see in the demo. Instead of usernames, and of course there aren't pictures associated with them, there's no thumbnails or accounts associated with them, you get this string of information. So you can still separate these accounts, but nobody can see who it belongs to. And this prevents unintentional bias on top of knowing whose information you're looking at. Priva also works closely with our compliance manager. So if you're a state agency, you're probably familiar with any number of compliance requirements. For California, it's the CCPA. If you're in law enforcement, you've probably encountered CJIS before, and there's numerous others. We keep those requirements here in the compliance manager. And if you've looked at them, you know that they're dense, they're detailed, they have a lot of steps that you have to follow to meet compliance. Privacy is usually just one of those things. Within the compliance manager, we give you all those requirements that you have to meet in order to achieve compliance with them. We break them down into steps. We break them down into areas for each one. One is privacy. One can be something like Security, one can be something like operational controls. How do you review ex-employees and control their access? And then we provide you guidance on what to do and how to use our tools in 365 to do it. This works specifically with Priva. So one example would be the CCPA, California statute. There is a section in the California statute in our compliance manager that will tell you, hey, here's how you can use the subject rights requests in Priva to meet the right to deletion requirement. It'll give you a link and it will tell you, here's the tool, here's where you can find it, here are the steps to follow to meet this requirement. So our compliance manager will tell you, here's the insights you can do, even if you don't want to go through and set up this beginnings of a project. It can tell you, here are some of the first things to look at, and here's your guidance for how to address them. Now, Priva and the subject rights requests, what was previously known as data subject rights requests, or DSRs, are licensed a little bit differently than the rest of our offerings. And the reason we did this is because we wanted people to use what they need instead of having to buy something for their whole organization on the assumption they may need it. So we wanted to preserve that flexibility for our customers. So per user, you can buy a license right here for $5 a month per user, or you can go buy a trial for 90 days. The trials absolutely include the full features, and you can get all of these insights on the people that you use the licensing with, and we're going to see what these dashboards look like in the demo. Similar to subject rights requests, or similar to Priva, the subject rights requests are licensed in a slightly different way. Each license is a consumable search and review for their content. It's an entire case where you can go through, you can review things, you can take notes, you can invite collaborators, you can create an additional Teams channel based on the privacy discovery with subject rights requests. So if you need to have multiple people come in and review content and make sure it's all there, if you need to review stuff with your other stakeholders, this makes it easy to set up an entire workflow. So you don't have to tell somebody build this and label it and invite people to it. It's all here in one centralized location. You don't have to put it in other systems. You don't have to take it out of your 365 environment where it's guarded. It's all right here. And you can buy these as needed. So if you know somebody submitted a request and you have 90 days to comply, you can buy the license for them then and use it without needing to purchase something for your whole organization all at once. All right, I don't want to spend too much time on these slides. I do want to get to our demo and let you actually see what this looks like in practice. These slides can be made available, but other than that, let me turn it over to Steve so you can see what this actually looks like if you were to use it in your environment. Steve, are you ready?
I am. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, so we don't have all the time in the world, and we've got a lot to talk about, so I'll probably go fast. I will ask that if you have any questions while the demo is going on, if you could post those in the chat. My colleagues will be monitoring the chat for Q&A, and of course, this will be recorded, so if you miss something, you can easily go back and watch the recording as well. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be going through 3 sections of demo, including find and visualize your personal data and privacy risk, empower the employees to make smart data handling decisions, and then finally customizing your policies so you can automate that privacy risk management going forward. So let's start with the find and visualize your personal data and privacy risks. All right, so here, right here we have, Microsoft Priva is in the Purview Compliance Center, and as long as you have Office 365 or Microsoft 365 enterprise licenses, you're going to be able to see the privacy solution highlighted on the homepage of the Compliance Center. However, you will need to, of course, activate at least a 90-day free trial so you can actually assess the solution here. And what's going to happen is And I will caveat that this is going to take a few days. Once you land on the overview page of the solution, it may take a few days for the dynamic insights to initially pop up, because what it's telling you in the background, it's assessing how personal data is evolving in your Microsoft 365 environment. So, the purpose of this page is to kind of give you a great little purview into your privacy estate. See what I did there? And then as you continue to use this solution, the overview page is going to refresh to provide current information. For example, here, we can see that there are new items with personal data in the last 7 days. Policy matches, we have subject rights request overdue. And also note that once you activate the trial or solution, it's going to give you insights into key risk scenarios for data minimization, data overexposure, and data transfers. The whole point of this is so you can see actionable insights from the beginning. And you will start to see some show up within the first 24 hours. And then I can click on each tile to take further investigation. So I'm going to check the new items with personal data here. So as we, from here, I can see the 5 items with personal data. You might see more in your tenant. And this solution provides a few filters on the top to kind of help you identify the riskiest items that require your attention. For example, when I click on access level here, to select more risky access scenarios, I could then take a further look. And then there, that's interesting there. I've selected public access and external access, the riskiest access levels for my organization. Now, once I select the access level, it will only show me the items with either public access, external access, or both. And as you can see here, one file meets the requirement. I can then, since this file is a Microsoft Excel document, I can then click on the file to see content directly in the solution here, without the need to locate the file manually. And the file shows up how it usually does in any Office experience. I can view the Excel file and tabs easily in the experience. And I see here that there are a lot of personal data in this file. So we should have better personal data access policies to help govern these files. So I'm going to show you how to create issues and policies later soon, but let's jump back to the overview page. Now, let's see, I'm going to click over here, and first we can see the key insights highlights here, including content items with the most personal data, users with the most policy matches in the last week. You can then click on any of the insight, to learn more. On the right-hand side, we can see policy alerts. Like I mentioned before, there are 3 policies turned on by default. Data transfers, data overexposure, data minimization. We can also see the trend of personal data found and the trends of these 3 policy matches on the dashboard, including data transfer detected. In the unused personal data that hasn't been modified in the last 60 days, or overexposed personal data that was shared publicly or company-wide or externally. You can also see the insights related to subject rights requests on the dashboard, getting a clear view of the residency of subject rights requests. Now, granted, in this example, for most of our state and local governments, we certainly don't necessarily want to see things on a global scale, but in some cases there might be outsourcing going on, and that may pop up a series of privacy concerns there as well. So we're going to hover over here to unused personal data and the overexposed personal data boxes here. And now I want to show you how admins can react to the alerts. Other than the default policies, the alert also captures any policy that you customize or created in the solution. Let's take a look at the anonymous link oversharing match detect. So we can see the details of this alert. It was detected on December 17th. I can click on the content tab to see more details. And here I can see the item name, and I can already tell by the title of the document I have some concerns. And if I hover over the personal data type column, I can see that there are 5 personal data types detected in the file. Now, it might be a big issue here if the file is overshared. So here I can choose to elevate this alert now to an issue. I can create the issue name and put in a description to track the privacy risk detected here. So we're going to call this HR candidate overshare, and we're going to click create issue. And now the issue is created. And then I can view the issues on the policy page by clicking view issues. And I can see the issue I just created shown up here. I can then click on the first issue, HR candidate overshare. I can then see more details about this issue. For example, I can view the file under the content tab. It gives me a very similar experience we had when clicking on the new person data file. And I click on Danica's HR candidate profiles, and because it's a Word document, I have a native preview handler there, and I can see the content natively in the solution. I can also see the file activities by clicking on file activities and to see a timeline of this oversharing behaviors. Here I can see that Danica created an anonymous link for twice in the past 2 days. As an admin, I want to protect this data, so I can choose to remediate the risk here. So I'm going to click on remediate, and then I can choose to notify the owner or unshare the file. Or here I'm going to choose a more structured way to manage this file by applying a sensitivity label. Again, part of the entire holistic Microsoft 365 and Purview compliance story. Again, we're going to, look at this from a holistic view and take the appropriate action, which is to apply a sensitivity label to the file, such as highly confidential, and that'll encrypt the file as well. At the same time, I can notify Danica that I applied the label to make sure we protect this file appropriately. This is how we can create an issue when seeing an alert and take remediation actions. But again, this is not scalable, as there could be lots of such incidents that admins will need to manage. A more scalable way would be to empower the end users or information workers to mitigate these requests through automated policies. And again, we can't always trust humans to do the right thing, and that's where the AI and the automation within Priva really comes in handy. So I'm going to skip the steps to apply the label here and show you how automated policies work to empower the employees to make positive decisions on personal data hit. So click close. And now we're going to move to how we can empower employees to make these smart data handling decisions. I want to show you the information worker experience first, so you can see the power of the solution once you create the policy. And then we're going to show you how to create and customize your own policy after that. So here we are in Teams, and we can see that Bob in the US is trying to send personal data to his colleague Sam in the UK. Since the admin has already set up a policy to prevent this from happening, we can see that the transfer is being blocked in the moment, preventing the data from being transferred outside of the US. In addition to Teams blocking the transfer, Bob also gets a pop-up educating him on why he shouldn't be transferring such information. You may notice this is very similar to the data loss prevention experience, but it also works for data transferred within the organization, but crosses regions or departments. The information worker can click on the alert to learn more about the message block, and it's going to tell us, hey, your message was blocked due to a policy. Now, in some situations, the org might allow such transfer if there is an appropriate or valid justification. So Bob could still send the information if he absolutely needs to, but is made aware of all the consequences here. That's what's actually important here. So, we're ensuring that organizations do not have to choose between privacy and productivity with that option. And research has shown that this type of in-the-moment education drives real behavioral change, and over time, privacy will start becoming second nature to every employee in your organization. And it also frees up the admin time, so they can focus on more important, high severity or strategic tasks. Now, this is the end user experience for data overexposure policy. In this case, the data owner is going to receive a data owner is going to receive a oops. Sorry. In this case, the data owner is going to receive an email digest informing him of items that have open access or are overshared. Right from Outlook, the data owner can then take action to make the content private or keep as is. Now, a few things to call out in these scenarios. Admins have the ability to override end users' information worker. So it is not monitoring users. I want to stress that. It's looking at the data to understand how the data is being used, who has access, and how it is getting transferred and shared to help proactively identify and mitigate the privacy risk. It's important to remember that 92% of privacy incidents are inadvertent. No one wants to do the wrong thing or to not comply with privacy policies, generally speaking, of course. It is just hard to keep up with ever-changing requirements. The in-the-moment and contextual training is a great way of encouraging good behavior, and it's going to drive that positive behavioral change in the long term. So let's talk now about how admins can create and customize policies to have the information worker experience we just showed. We're going to create a policy for data exposure here. So on the policy page, I can see all my tenant policies here, alerts, issues. I can then start creating a new policy by clicking on the bottom. Now, there are lots of easy buttons here, lots of templates. That's the great thing about Purview and Previa. We have always available, policy templates to help you, if you're not really experienced in privacy management. And of course, as always, you can also choose to create a customized one on your own. But what we're going to do, we're going to do a little bit of both here. We're going to choose a data transfer policy and tweak it a little bit here. So to review the default settings of the template, including the data types, data locations, and the conditions that trigger the policy matches, we're going to click the view settings. And then here we can see that by default, the policy detects all personal data which was transferred from North America to any regions of the world, covering all the users and the tenant. We'd like to create a new policy that detects cross-department data transfer or cross-agency data transfer. And I can create the setting to create this new customized policy. So I'm going to click on Edit Settings here. And, let's assume that, Contoso engineering team processes a lot of customer data from the product usage, and we want to manage how they share that data, especially to the sales and marketing teams, who usually wants to contact customers to have sales conversations. So here we can give this new policy a name. And we're going to call this data transfer engineering to sales and marketing. Add some description if we want. And then we're going to choose the type of data to monitor, or the type of data we want to monitor and cover. Now, these classification groups are sets of data that are based already on key privacy regulations, such as GDPR or HIPAA. And you can view details of any group to see what types of personal information it covers. I can add more classification groups or remove the ones that are not relevant here. Say if the policy is US only, then I can choose the US classification groups instead of all personal data. Or I can, I can choose to add individual sensitive information types if I really want to get granular. When you choose this option, you can search and select each info type. Click Add, and then add that one more condition. And then I have here all of the sits that are from the Information Protection Data Classification Engine. But I'm going to go with the default setting here and go to the next step. And then I can, of course, choose classification groups. And next. And then here I can choose the user and groups to cover. We're going to choose all users and groups here. And then we choose the locations. You can also choose specific SharePoint sites too, if the policy is created specifically for certain projects like, let's say, an HR interview day. And then you could choose, in this case, you can choose the conditions for the policy. And this is the key part of this policy. We want to set up a data transfer policy to manage data shared from the engineering team to the sales and marketing team. So I can customize the policy here to transfer between departments in your organization. This is really helpful for state and local governments when they actually have to deal with multiple agencies working under the same tenant as well. And then here I can choose the sender department and then select engineering here, add, and then select the recipient department. And I'm going to select sales and marketing. And then the condition to trigger the policy is actually selected here. In this case, it's transfers between departments in your organization. And now we're going to select the outcomes. Whenever a policy match is detected, which is the types of personal data that we selected before, being sent from engineering to the sales and marketing team, you can choose to use to give the users in-product communication to educate them, again, in real time, on the potential privacy risks, like the team's experience we demonstrated earlier. Again, the in-the-moment contextual training effectively influences your IWs to have those behavioral changes. So I'm going to hover here, open that, and you can also choose to send an email notification to the user, allowing them to take actions in Outlook, as we saw earlier, to mitigate risk and help train the users to make smart data handling decisions. If you choose to do the email notification, you can also configure the frequency based on your organization's culture. You kind of tweak it. Again, because in some cases you don't necessarily want to necessarily overspam the inboxes. And then lastly, you can add the URL that if you have training and you have it available, you can supply the URL for that relevant training so they can learn more about best practices. And then specify the alerts and thresholds. You can decide whether to trigger alerts when a policy match is detected. If you're concerned that it's going to generate too many alerts, you can also set up a specific threshold to receive those alerts to help reduce the admin's workload. We're going to leave this here as do not alert and let the system engage with the information workers to manage that risk. And then, of course, finally, if you would like to assess a new policy before fully activating it, you can set your policy to test mode. Now, test mode in Priva is kind of like audit and test modes in some of our other compliance products. It enables you to look for matches from the last 30 days, gauge the policy's behavior, and review the types of policy matches that would be generated when actively running the policy. You know, what if scenario. We recommend testing policies for at least 5 days to get representative results. And you have the option during the test phase to edit and adjust the policy settings. And then after you get those insights running the test, then you can proceed to turn it on efficiently. And when a policy is running in test mode, no user notification mails will be delivered. So we're going to go ahead and turn this on. And then, of course, finally, we're going to review the policy configuration and create the policy. We're going to skip it here, but you get the sense of how to create the new policy. Now, finally, I want to close out the demo by talking about this we've been talking about privacy risk management. Now I want to move over to the second major portion of what we're talking about with Microsoft Priva, the subject rights request feature of Priva. So we're going to show this particular demo in 4 sections. We're going to start with creating the request. Then after the data is automatically collected, we're going to show you how this data volume is estimated and how to review the data. One of the most important tools needed when reviewing data is collaboration and workflow. Richard talked about, but you can do this already by hand, or even worse, what we call digitally by digital hand, which is just not scalable. It's very expensive. It takes a long time. And the whole point of Microsoft Priva is how you can get that data, call that data, and collaborate on that data securely and efficiently, and then how to generate reports with all the proper redactions in place necessary that is fully compliant with privacy regulations. So let's get started. Let's start with creating the request. Now, real quick, the Priva subject rights request solution is also located in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. Richard already went over this. I do want to point out that there is a separate licensing for this, and it's sold differently. It's sold in units of actual requests. And once you enter the solution, then you can actually see the overview of your company's performance on fulfilling subject rights requests, including the number of overdue requests and the trend of each subject right request. But you're not going to see this initially because once you're doing it for the first time, there's no initial information to look at. So this is an example of something where we've already been using this particular product for some time. I just want to point that out if you're actually new to this and you're actually trying this for the first time. Now, if you're an admin with the right permission, you can open a new request here. That permission that you need, the special role that you need within Purview is Subject Rights Management Administrators, or higher. Now, when we click to create this request, the wizard is going to guide us through the process of creating a request. Like everything else in Purview, it's a nice wizard. You don't have to be an expert IT pro. This is not designed for IT pros. This is designed for the type of stakeholders and personas that actually use and are responsible for privacy management and subject rights request fulfillment. So now I'm going to add the details of the subject rights request and fill out the fields, including name, email, and residency. And this is going to be Akira Jennings. She's a current Contoso employee here. And then select current employee as the data subject information. And then I can scope my search to target specific SharePoint sites, Teams channels, and OneDrive for Business locations. For each location, you can select all instances, such as all Exchange mailboxes or specific instances, such as one user mailbox. When we're talking about searching for data, whether it's Teams chats, whether it's mail, all of that is under the purview of Exchange, because that's how it's actually stored in residency in the Microsoft 365 estate on the back end. The same with SharePoint. Certain things from Teams channels that deal with content are going to be treated as SharePoint in the back end. The same with OneDrive for Business sites as well. So wanted to point out that clarification for location. It does say Exchange and SharePoint, but it does include Teams chats, Teams channels, and OneDrive for Business as well. And then you can further refine your search with the options shown on this page, including adding more identifiers about the data subject, including content authored by the data subject, which may return a higher volume of data. If you suspect that the data volume is going to be big, though, you can choose to get an estimate first before the data is automatically retrieved. Some admins like to estimate that data volume first, in case you want to go and adjust and refine the search criteria further. Here, though, we're going to select all three. Why not? And then the wizard is going to bring me to the option of filling in more advanced search parameters. Here, I can provide more identifiable information about the data subject, like nicknames, phone numbers, or address. And then I can add more conditions to the search, including content types, size of the file, senders, recipients. I'll choose a time frame condition here to collect data created in the last 12 months because that's the particular requirement of this request. And some of the regulations also require a 12-month look back since the data of the request. So I'm going to add this condition to help me meet that requirement and also to reduce the data processing effort. Enter the time range for this search. And then on this page, I can choose a request type based on what the data subject wants you to do with their data. If their request relates to a specific data privacy regulation, you can also select it from a provided list to add more content for analysis in the future, whether it's the California Consumer Privacy Act, whether it's GDPR, whether it's the US Patriot Act. In this particular case, we're going to select the California Consumer Privacy Act. And then you can also edit the deadline to help track the request process as well. And then give the request a name and description. And then finally, we review the summary of what we've entered during the previous steps. Any field can be edited before you select create the request. So we're going to select create request and the subject rights request has been created. Takes a few seconds. And now we can see the request show up on the top page here. Now, the second part of the demo, we're going to talk about what happens after you create a subject rights request. After you create a subject rights request, the solution is going to use your inputs about your subject to look for matches in your organization's Microsoft 365 environment. Once this data has been compiled, you can then review the findings, make choices about what to include, and most importantly, you can redact information as necessary. So let's talk about how this actually works here. So this is a request that was just created for Akira Jennings. After a request is created, the solution identifies those items that include potential matches to your data subject and makes notes of their locations in Microsoft 365. I also want to point out this is not completely instantaneous. It might take up to 60 minutes. Once the estimation is complete, if you determine that the initial results of your search query look satisfactory, you can then proceed to retrieve that data. If you want to make changes before proceeding, you can then choose to edit your search query first. I can see here that we have 2.8 megs of data matching the search criteria for this request. The volume looks about right here, so I can then choose to retrieve the data for review. And then the system's going to work. It's going to take a little bit of time, up to an hour or so, to retrieve that data. And then once that data is retrieved, here, I'm speeding it up here. We're doing the cooking show format here because we don't have but so much time here. After the data is retrieved, I can see more information about this request, including the data location and the priority items to review. So we're going to click on About Priority Items. And priority items include items that contain the subject's personal data and are marked as confidential information or contain multiple individuals' personal data. The items may require further reviews with other stakeholders or redaction before exporting them to fulfill the request. I can click here to review the data collected. And now I can do a built-in review within the solution by selecting any file on this page. The built-in review saves you time on manually locating and opening the file one by one to review them. I mean, again, it's about speeding optimization of the whole process. So I'm going to click the second 920 Spartan background check here. Now, again, because it's an Excel document, the preview handler is going to pop up and you can see the same experience as a source file. I mean, I can see the whole Excel experience in this view. I can even jump between tabs or see Excel formulas directly if needed. Same with PowerPoint. In PowerPoint, you can also see the content in the notes area too. It's that Microsoft 365 Priva better together story there. In addition to the content, you can also see more details of the file itself. Under details, I can see the personal data protected and the priority of the type in the file. So if this file is labeled with the highly confidential label with appropriate protection, it contains multiple people's personal data, we're going to need to redact the other people's data before providing access to Akira, obviously. So under the Annotate tab, you can create inline markups or redact data. And this is cool here because you can then select area redaction, and then you can just drag it down and black out the area with other people's information. Once the personal data is redacted, the file is ready to be included in the response to the data subject. You can click include to include this file, and then the solution is going to create a copy of the redacted file and then convert it to PDF for the subject to access. Nothing in the original file is altered, and it will remain in its original location. So, and also you can add additional notes here if needed while including the file. The note will be visible to users working on the request, but will not be included in the final report or shared with the data subject. Here, containing subjects PD, and click submit. And now this item is included in the final report. You can review each file or use the search bar here to do kind of bulk includes, exclude, or tagging. And then that takes us to the next part of the demo, where we're going to leverage tools to collaborate with other stakeholders securely and efficiently, because responding to a data request could be like a complicated project to manage. You might need to collaborate with a legal team, compliance team, or even the data subjects manager, et cetera. I mean, it's important to keep the collaboration secure while at the same time being efficient, since you don't want to create more personal data of the subject while working on the request or create any inadvertent data leakage incidents. So let's talk about how you can achieve that here. So under the Collaborators tab in the request, you can add more collaborators specifically for this request. So when you click Add Collaborator, we're going to add Aiden Duarte from the legal team. And the beauty, again, of the Microsoft 365 Better Together story here is that this solution supports collaboration securely through Microsoft Teams to allow your group to work together on subject rights requests. So now we're going to click Chat with Collaborators. And when you actually select, or when you actually create the new request, a Teams channel is going to be automatically created and associated with your request by default. And this is where you can actually discuss the request and safely share input and contributions. This way, you can ensure that all the collaboration content is in one place, so you can manage that content easily instead of sending multiple emails to stakeholders and needing to remove those emails one by one manually. And coming back to the request, I want to show you how you can further use Power Automate in Teams to collaborate with others. So we're going to click here on Data Collected. I bet you didn't know this was going to be a Microsoft 365 all up story, but it is. Back to the Review tab here, there are many robust review tools to use here. One of them is tagging the file. For example, let's say I identified multiple files that need further follow-up from other collaborators. I can choose them and then apply tags to indicate the need of follow-up. And here I'm going to just choose follow-up and click submit. And now you can create as many tags here to help you organize and categorize your review. Now here we're going to use this tag to get files for other collaborators' attention. So we're going to click Automate. And there are a few Power Automate templates provided by default. And if any of them trigger interest, feel free to look at our additional documentation on Microsoft Preview on some of these. We're going to just use the first one here, get files by tag for a subject rights request. And then that's going to trigger the run flow. And we're going to get the files that are tagged with follow-up. And we're going to click the box underneath tag name here. And we can also turn on the toggle to automatically share those files via the Teams channel. And once the flow is executed, we can see the file locations are shared in the Teams channel. And collaborators will be able to discuss these files here more easily without the need to copy and paste the file names back and forth manually. And then for the last few minutes that I have here, we're going to talk about generating the reports and finally fulfilling the request. Now we've reviewed all this data, we've collaborated. It's now time to create the final report and fulfill the request. So here we see the review status of each file is marked and the review is complete. We can then go ahead to complete the review. So clicking complete the review, and then I can provide, again, some internal only notes here. And the solution will then create the reports and collect the files marked for include during the data review process. Selected files from these data packages can then be submitted to our data subject to complete the request. So we're going to click on Generate Reports, and the subject rights request data package is generated as a zip file. I want to point out we're doing a cooking show here, so it can take up to 30 minutes to generate this package. So I'm going to click on Generate Reports, and then I can click Reports. And here I can see the subject rights request export package. The report generation is in progress. This will take, again, up to 30 minutes to complete this task. And fast forward, now it's ready for download, and reports generated through this tool and associated data, such as all of our annotated files, are saved in Azure and are stored for a specific length of time. This duration is defined at a global level through settings in the data retention period section. So you can choose between 30 and 90 days. And so here I'm going to click on the subject rights request export package, and the package is generated as a zip file. The data package is going to contain an assortment of files, and the files outside the Azure folder are provided for reference and should be used primarily by administrators. The key materials for your data subject are going to be in a folder called Azure in the zip file. We recommend reviewing the contents of the folder carefully and submitting only the necessary files to your data subject. And then download it. Ready to download. The zip file is downloaded. Let's open it up and take a look here. And of course, the exported files are renamed using unique identifiers to help protect personal data. You can cross-reference the unique names with the original file name that will be contained in a CSV file inside the zip package. And in this folder, you can see that there are a few files with the suffix _burn PDF. These are the redacted files. We can open one up to see how it looks in the package to the data subject. And you can see that the redaction we created is there, blacking out all of the personal data, and it shows only Akira's information. So the idea here is to review the contents of your zip file, modify it as needed, take out anything you don't want in the final package, and then you can, once complete, send it securely to your data subject. We recommend, if you can, integrate the solution with your existing business processes. There is a subject rights request API as well that is documented on Microsoft Learn as well. And when you've performed all of the necessary actions to resolve your DSR, you can click Close the Request. It's going to create the final report, which will be encrypted and made available in the Reports tab. Now the request is closed. Note that reports generated through this tool and all of the associated data, such as annotated files saved in Azure, are stored for a specific length of time. Again, go back to what I said earlier, the duration is defined at a global level through settings in the data retention period section. You can choose between 30 and 90 days. And we're coming up on the top of the hour. That was a lot to talk about in such a short period of time. I highly encourage you dive deeper into this, looking at our technical documentation at aka.ms/Priva docs. Start again a 90-day trial and try it out. And again, we also include the private page, the product page as well. We'll throw those links as well into the chat. And I understand the value of your time. I'll hang around for a minute or two, but if you need to go to another call, we certainly understand. I very much appreciate your time today on behalf of myself and Richard as well.
Very nicely done, Steve. Thank you, everybody. We are at the top of the hour, so that was a lot in an hour. Appreciate your time. Are there any questions? We'll take everybody off mute and feel free to ask any questions either on chat or in voice. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for seeing and hearing more about Priva, one of our new solutions tied very much to our compliance offering. Leo, I see there you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to put in a plug for our next upcoming webinar on January 5th. So just to make you guys aware, on January 5th, same time, same channel, we are going to be hosting a webinar for CGIS compliance. So if you have a need, you or your team to meet CGIS requirements, we'll be hosting a webinar. We'll also be having a webinar on January 12th for HIPAA compliance. So if that's an area of concern for you, then you'll want to join one or both of these webinars. So we are looking forward to seeing you. And I'll hand it back to you, Beserra.
Leo, thank you for bringing that up. Everybody have a great holiday, and apologize, I have some work being done in my house. Sorry for the background noise, but assuming there are no more questions, thanks again for joining today and have a great rest of the week. Thank you.